Hello and welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. Have you heard that the inaugural Landscape Photography World Awards is now open for entries? Head to landscapephotographyworldawards.com to find out all the details and how to enter. There's some amazing prizes to be won, and I'll be publishing a book and calendar with the top images from the competition, so plenty to look forward to. Entries close on November 30, 2022, so time is running out to get your entries sorted. I'd also like to thank the judges who have agreed to work with me and be a big part of the awards. Deb Clark, Victoria Hark, Kieran Stone and William Patino. I certainly couldn't make this competition a reality without their support. Sapna Reddy is a landscape photographer based in Northern California. She's currently pursuing dual careers as a photographer and a physician. As a radiologist, she analyses images in an attempt to establish diagnosis to achieve cure. As a photographer, she aspires to generate images that are both a creative expression for the artist as well as a therapeutic visual for the viewer. Her work has been awarded in competitions run by National Geographic, USA Landscape Photographer of the Year, Lonely Planet, Popular Photography, and Outdoor Photographer, amongst others. Sapna has been published internationally and featured on Adobe, Sony, Lonely Planet and Flickr platforms, in addition to incorporation into multiple medical centres to create an ambience of healing. Her images have been used for video conferencing needs by corporations including Google, Gap, Hitachi, Yahoo, etc. She conducts workshops within the US as well as internationally, and these are focused on identifying and fine-tuning individual creative style and creating useful images. These workshops are focused on identifying and fine-tuning individual creative style and creating meaningful images. She's a brand ambassador for Gura Gear and Velaret. In addition, she's a creative collaborator for Bay Photolab, Flickr and B&H. We talk about how she balances her dual careers, why it would be great for a section of the community to stay at home, along with much, much more. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi Sapna, how are you going?
I'm doing good, Grant. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Welcome to Landscape Photography World. What we like to talk about here is obviously how people are motivated to get into landscape photography and what they sort of think about when they're out shooting and what they think about when they're processing images and so forth. I'd like to start a little bit differently than I normally do. Normally I ask, who you are and where you're from and that sort of thing. But I guess one of the things I'm really interested in with photographers is, what do you actually like about being a photographer? What is it that makes you want to be a photographer?
I think for me, it's that feeling of flow, that meditative state that we enter when we are completely immersed in the creative process. Mm-hmm. I feel like you transcend to a state of bliss when you are able to kind of put your heart, mind, and soul on what's present in front of you when you're completely immersed in creating the image. It's unlike anything else we really do in our day-to-day lives. And I love that feeling. In some ways, it's like meditation, I think, in becoming so focused. But I think those of us who are able to indulge in those moments on a repetitive basis have sort of found a secret source of joy. And it definitely has a very positive impact on our lives when we're able to do that. So for me, photography is the vehicle that takes me to that state. So I enjoy it for that reason.
I really like that answer. That's absolutely marvelous. So what would you say to somebody that hadn't seen your work in terms of what your style is? And I'd like to get into, once you've talked a bit about that, about how that style has developed over time and where you see it going.
So I like to think of the images that I create as serving some sort of therapeutic purpose. So I like to think of it as visual therapy. And visual therapy to me means two things. One, the fact that you're standing before something that is obviously beautiful and you have established an emotional connection to, and you're trying to depict how you're feeling towards that scene. So that process is therapeutic. But once the image is generated and then you share it and others view it, the way they take it in is, again, visual therapy repeating itself. So
absolutely,
it's both for the creator and the consumer. I think both tend to enjoy the therapeutic effects of that visual. So that's been basically my approach. So I like to generate images that are soothing, that you would like to welcome into your mind and develop on, and sort of have a calming effect on the person who's consuming the art. So that's been the impetus for my creations.
Fantastic. So in terms of where your style is at now, is it something that you're really comfortable with? Is it something you're trying to extend on? And I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about how you've actually developed your style over time and where you see you started and where you see you are now and where you see yourself going.
I think when I started out initially, it was more, chasing the shot that was probably inspired by something that I saw, other photographers who I admired, whose work I tried to emulate, who gave me inspiration to go out into the outdoors and chase the light and sort of try to create my own version of that location. So initially it was the adventure that drew me outdoors, and, the time that I spent in nature, I really enjoyed. And it was more of an adventure back then. But I think the more I do it, actually, now I perceive it as less of an adventure and more of a soothing effect, sort of a healing effect.
Sure. So it's more therapeutic now than it was in the past.
Yes. I mean, the adventure is still there, but I guess since, if you keep having adventures on a repeated basis, you sort of get used to that as well. And then you start looking for more meaning to what you're pursuing. And that's where the healing part comes in, I think. And, finding, like I said earlier, those moments of bliss when I can just lose myself completely. So I strive for that now more than I did before, for sure. So that's sort of the evolution my art has taken.
Okay. So
it's definitely a learning process. I think,
definitely.
Like going forward. Yeah. Obviously I still have a long way to go in terms of getting to where I want to be. So it's a continuous growth curve, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I guess, what is it that you're chasing the most now in your photography? What are you obviously that meditative state is something that you're really keen on. Is that where you see yourself, I guess, progressing further, or, are you looking for other things in your photography?
Yeah, definitely. I think finding that calm state of mind, and just soaking in the present moment and observing the nuances of light, sort of fine-tuning myself, both in terms of sensory reception as well as visual appreciation of being in that moment. And then the technical aspect of it in terms of, okay, what is the story going to be about? How am I going to compose it? How can I make it a compelling image? All of that sort of happens almost at a subconscious level now, because, you're, without realizing it, you're probably drawn to something that's in the scene before you. So that automatically becomes the focus of your image. And then all of the knowledge you have gained over the years in photography, you would apply to say, okay, how can I create a strong visual pathway that would bring about a compelling image, right? So the arrangement of those visual elements and to remove distractions because you want the image to be more minimalistic and more impactful. So that analysis happens sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously. And sometimes it doesn't happen. Like I'm still struggling and it's just not coming together. The image just doesn't feel right. I have those moments as well. So
I think we all do. Yeah.
But yeah.
Do you think it's important to have goals in your photography?
I am that kind of person. Yeah. I like to set myself goals, but they're not in terms of like bagging the shot per se, but say more importantly to teach myself to be truly happy every time I go out to shoot. Now that's a goal I would definitely strive for, and that's also something I try to talk to in my workshops. When I'm trying to teach my clients, and because I think that is much more important than bagging the shot, right? Because if we have learned to enjoy the experience of acquisition of the image itself, then whether we get the image or not becomes superfluous at that point, right? It doesn't really matter. So I hope to achieve that. And the more I shoot, the less important the image becomes, that final image, I mean. And actually, the easier it gets to get something that I am really happy about. So I think we all go through that phase where you gradually fine-tune your style and sort of settle into what you find truly appealing, and being able to recognize it quickly, when you're in the scene, and then start to render it. So it seems to be happening with greater frequency now than it did before.
Yeah, no, that's great. Do you, in talking about that process, I guess, do you find yourself taking fewer images now because of that, and you're more selective in what you're shooting? Or do you still sort of, and I'm not saying anyone is a spray and pray sort of photographer, but are you still taking as many as you did when you started?
I think I have always been a deliberate shooter. In fact, I think I always took too few, and I sort of still do that. I tend to take my time with the images, and I like to, unless the light is changing and the story is changing through the scene, I like to wait and see, wait for that opportune moment when I do feel that, it's the right time to make the image. When I started initially, I'm sure I took more than I do now, just because sometimes you don't know what the right moment is. It takes a little bit of practice, and sometimes you're not sure of the composition, so you're trying different perspectives and different compositions. And with practice, the number has definitely gone down, and the yield sort of is much better now than it was before. But even at the beginning, I think I was a slow shooter. Like I took my time taking the images.
Yeah, cool.
So that's why I can't shoot wildlife if my life depended on it.
A lot of photographers I talk to, particularly at the more experienced end of their careers, tend to say that they're more than happy just watching the scene in front of them unfold, as opposed to necessarily busying themselves in the process of taking the shot. And for me, I guess the question is that something that you're conscious of when you're out in the field? Are you thinking about the fact that, okay, I'm really just going to relax, enjoy what's unfolding in front of me, as opposed to, okay, I've got to really nail what I'm doing and get the shot? Obviously, changing light, as you said, sometimes gets the pulse racing a little bit, but that meditative, I guess, experience is something that I'd like to explore a little bit more.
I definitely don't I don't stress out over bagging the shot, but by the same token, I don't spare anything in terms of attention, focus, changing up the perspective, like trying to keep up with the technical stuff, because it does matter to me. It's time that I'm spending out there, which is well served by generating that image. And since I enjoy creating the image, I definitely invest all of my senses and attention and time and effort in getting the shot. What I guess I have evolved into is, if after all of that effort, the shot doesn't pan out for whatever reason, maybe there wasn't any color in the sky, or maybe, some other technical glitch, I have learned not to get upset or frustrated about that. So what I try to do is to enjoy that process of getting the image. But if for any reason it doesn't work out, then I definitely feel I've come to the point where I don't get overtly upset or sad or anything like that. Just accept the fact that sometimes it doesn't work out, and that's okay. So
I think that, to be honest, that's one of the most healthiest attitudes, I think, towards photography that you can get to, is where, okay, things aren't going quite the way you'd like, and you kind of just shrug and get on with it,
Yeah, and I think, a part of the reason why I have gotten to that state is because when I teach workshops and I'm involved with clients, I do have some clients who will feel very bitter when they don't get a shot, like very, very frustrated and sad. And when that unfolds before you realize that they have taken what should have been a beautiful experience and transformed it into something quite ugly, only because of something that is beyond our control, right? So why do that? I think when it plays out in front of your eyes and you're a little bit removed and watching it as a spectator, because I see the client going through it, every time I see that, it reiterates to me how important it is not to do that.
Absolutely.
So I think teaching photography, I myself have learned so much from the people around me. So I'm grateful to have that perspective, because maybe if I did not teach photography and I did not see other people go through that frustration, maybe I would have become a victim to it as well and not even realized it was happening.
Sure. While we're talking about workshops, why don't we talk a little bit about the business side? When did you decide that photography was going to be something that you wanted to turn into, I guess, more of a business / career than anything else you were doing?
So I actually did not seek out teaching workshops actively. It sort of happened very organically, because I was posting my images on social media, and I had people reach out to me and say, hey, I want to do a one-on-one workshop with you. Would you like to, set something up? And since I'm also in the field of medicine and I'm an educator in that field, I like to teach. I enjoy sharing knowledge, and I love to see the improvement in, when I share that knowledge and then see the person receiving it do a great job with it. So it's extremely rewarding to go through that exercise for me. And so when people reached out and said, do you want to teach me? I was like, yeah, I'm more than happy to teach you. And the more I started doing that, the more I began to enjoy it. And I was like, I should really make this a part of my photography journey. And so now I conduct workshops that are confined to small groups, usually 4 or 5 people is the maximum I take.
Yep.
And then, it's focused on basically fine-tuning individual creative vision. So it's not like I'm trying to teach them my style, but I'm hoping that I can help them find their own style and then work on it and see what they find satisfying as a creator. So,
yeah, I think that's a really important way of educating as well, because I mean, you do hear about, people that run workshops sometimes, actually saying, okay, well, this is the composition. Here's how I would shoot it, et cetera, and as you say, teaching their style as opposed to necessarily teaching people to grow and formulate their own. I guess that's leads me to how somebody that signs up for one of your workshops, what could they expect to experience?
So I get super excited about good conditions. So there'll be a lot of positive energy, and I love to have adventures in the outdoors. I like to have fun, basically, during the workshop, because if you're not having fun, I feel you don't really learn that well, right? You don't have the right frame of mind
definitely.
to be learning.
I think play is a big part of education.
Yes. So first and foremost, it's like a very easy-going relationship, so everybody feels comfortable asking questions. Nobody feels like, uncomfortable raising even the smallest question or doubt they might have. And then there is a sense of camaraderie because it is a small group and, we are together and we're constantly exchanging ideas. And I am quite involved when it comes to analysis of compositions. So because it's a small group, I can afford to go from person to person and look over their shoulder and see, what kind of shot they're working and perhaps give them suggestions. And if I feel like the person is, very receiving of those suggestions, then of course I would give more. But if they feel like, I would like to try this on my own a little bit, then I give them, the space they need. So each person, of course, would be treated differently depending on what their individual needs are. But a lot of the workshop time is spent on what we do in the field, and then image critique, how are our images looking, what could we do differently. And then of course the post-processing is also a very big part of the workshop, because so now you have the raw material, but then how are you gonna infuse
how are you actually going to
shape
that into the finished product?
Exactly, and infuse it with your creative vision, right? Like make it your own, because it has to have your personality thrown in there. And how do you bring that about? And that I find it to be most interesting, because that's varied from individual to individual, and that's what makes their images unique to them. So I love working on that part as well. So it's basically from start to finish, from how we set up in the field to how we render the final image, helping them along the way. And the help is varied depending on what the need is for each person.
Oh, that's fantastic. Are you running multi-day workshops at all, or is it just a straightforward, here's a day or a half day or whatever?
I don't do day or half day. They're all multi-day, because I feel like that prolonged period of time is necessary to sort of develop a bond, develop a working relationship, and sort of see the progression. So it's usually the international workshops are around 2 weeks at a time, and then the domestic ones tend to be 4 or 5 days. So by the second or third day, I have a very good handle on, what the person is trying to work on and, what they're struggling with. And so we try to set goals together as to, by the end of this workshop, what are the things you would like to make sure that you accomplish? And so we make a list of that and we check all the boxes so that it gets done. So, the client also feels that sense of accomplishment, and they have the skills that they wanted to get and then practice on their own later on. So.
What are you doing in terms of the rest of the structure of your photography business? You're selling prints, NFTs, anything like that?
Yeah, so it's sort of multifaceted. Very early on in my career, I got contacted by an international art gallery franchise, Yellow Corner. They have galleries in about 80 countries worldwide, and they license images and then put them up in these various art galleries, and then they're subsequently sold. And I get a royalty sort of from those sales. So that's been going on for about a few years now, 8 to 10 years, I think. Okay. And then I have prints selling on my website as well. So occasionally I'll have somebody buying direct from the website. And then I also sell prints to corporations, specifically medical centers, because I'm a physician and because I'm focused on creating an ambiance of healing and, try to generate images that have more of a visual therapy emphasis. I do sell to hospitals and medical centers and have done quite a few of those as well. And those are just separate. So I deal with the corporation directly and show them my images and come up with a plan. And then we do either a full cancer center or a full ward or, a floor or a hospital or whatever. So that is done separately. So that's how the print sales have been going. And then I work as a collaborator with multiple brands. So I am a brand ambassador for Sony Alpha. And I also represent Gear, who make camera bags, and Nisi filters. And I work closely with Adobe. I actually am an educator for Adobe, and I'm currently developing their landscape learning module for Lightroom Academy. So I'm writing the chapters for that.
Cool.
And I also intermittently will submit articles to Adobe on specific topics, apart from the Lightroom Academy. And then I work with Flickr, and photo pills, like different platforms, and both as a content creator or sometimes they'll have a focus group sort of thing where they bring me on as an educator, and I do that. I also give talks, so I attend like photography conferences, and I'm a speaker. I represent B&H, the camera store in New York. So I do webinars for them, and then when they have conferences, the optic conferences, I am talking on stage for them for that. And then I also speak for camera clubs. I give talks for camera clubs. So the presentations with all these brands and stuff are like a different part of the photography business. And then I submit articles to magazines like On Landscape or Outdoor Photographer occasionally. So I like to write some articles. There are far fewer now just because of everything that's on my plate right now.
I was gonna say, how do you find time for it all? How do you balance your time? And obviously there's your own photography that you like to do as well. So how do you balance the competing demands that you have?
So my own photography, it ends up being on scouting expeditions, because like usually if I say I want to set up a workshop in Namibia, then I will go to Namibia and spend time there and scout the locations, try to understand the place, understand the potential for various locations, and also sort of work out the logistics, see if I, have the right tour guides, the drivers, all of the support staff that I need to run the workshop. And so during that time, I tend to shoot on my own. And so majority of my personal time is actually time that I'm scouting out locations. Sometimes the location works out, sometimes it doesn't, but at least I get to experience a place and get to, shoot to my heart's content. So I like that. And then, of course, that whenever I need to, I live pretty close to Yosemite, so I can get away to Yosemite or to Death Valley and just have quite a few friends in the photography community. So sometimes, we just want to relax and have a good time, then we're just shooting on our own during those periods as well. Because obviously when I'm with clients, that's all work related and I can't really shoot for myself during that time. So I tend to do that. So it does serve a purpose. Even when I'm shooting on my own, I'm actually kind of working towards that model of business, because that could potentially develop into a workshop in the future.
Yeah, right. One of the questions every photographer has that is looking to either start up in business and so forth is how to price your work and how to price or put a value on things. And I'm not after specific numbers here. It's more about the process of thinking about, okay, what's my time worth? How do I pull that together? Do you have any hints or tips that you could pass on that people could use?
I think because you are competing in a very competitive market, there's so many people who are doing workshops now, and given the plethora of information we have at our fingertips, it's pretty easy for anyone to set up a workshop, right? And attracting clients might be difficult, but in terms of being able to establish locations and stuff like that, it's pretty easy because so much of the information is available online. I think one of the first steps to consider if somebody is trying to set up a workshop and trying to decide on the price is to see what others are pricing similar workshops at. If it's 4 to 5 days in a certain location, what is the current rate? And you'll see that depending on what there is definitely a hierarchy amongst the creators, in that some are highly sought after, because they're extremely skillful, have had a phenomenal body of work, and obviously they can command a price that's far higher than others who may be more mediocre. And then, of course, there is the person who's just starting out, so they'll have to price it a little bit lower just to attract clients in the beginning. So there is quite a big range in terms of workshop pricing. But one thing that I would caution anyone who's just starting to do workshops is to have a higher standard, to basically charge sort of mid to higher level and deliver at a really high level. I think that's a better business model to have, rather than to say, let me, charge low and sort of, because that impacts everything. It impacts where you can go, how much you can spend on gas, how much you can spend on hotels. Are your clients comfortable? Are they getting a good night's rest? Are they eating well, right? Everything gets impacted if you try to slash the price. And then in the end, the goal should be to get repeat clients. So if your clients are not happy with the experience they have had, then you have essentially just hurt your own business. And undercutting somebody else's price didn't really help, because you have lost your own clients in trying to maintain something at a low cost. So I think that's important to keep in mind and say, how can I deliver a truly exceptional experience and still stay within the ballpark of reasonable charge?
Yeah, definitely. How do you define success in your photography?
I think success means different things to different people. Because
that's why I'm asking you. What's your definition?
Right.
Yeah.
My definition. Okay. So my definition is that let's say I'm doing a workshop, and at the end of the workshop, if I have had a really good time, and I look at the clients and they say, this is one of the best workshops we have had, then to me that is success right there, because you wanted to execute something because you had a desire to do it, and when it was completed, you and the people around you felt very good about it. That to me is success. And if you can do that on a repeated basis, then I think that's the definition of success for me. Everything else in terms of the monetary aspect of it, in terms of growing your business, in terms of visibility in social media, all of those, I think, develop as a consequence of that initial feeling of success. So as long as I'm able to deliver on my promise and, it's well received and it's a job that's well executed, then I'm happy, because everything else I feel falls into place once that's done.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. You've obviously travelled widely around the world and to some very exotic locations. What locations are still on your, bucket list? And I guess the high ones. Everyone's list is way longer than anybody could live or possibly live to get to all of them. But what's sort of the number 2, 1, 2, and 3 on your list now?
So I had never been to Africa before, and I recently went to Namibia, and I had to kick myself for not having gone sooner. I just fell in love with Africa, and I would like to explore so many more parts of that. So that's definitely on my list of places to sort of get into more. And then the other place that I really need to start photographing more is India. I have been to a lot of places in India because I grew up in India, but I was not a photographer when, I was in India and I was growing up. And so I never really photographed. And every time I go back, I tend to spend time with family. And if I feel kind of guilty to take time away from family and go photograph.
Yeah, so I know exactly what you mean. Yep.
Yeah. So, it's ironic that I have not done as much as I would like to. So I have like this list of places that I would really like to go to and photograph and start setting up workshops in India. And so that's another place that I'm definitely thinking of. And then the rest, I actually just keep my mind open. I love traveling. I love exploring new places. I love seeing new cultures. So it's not like there's so much more that I have to see. And so I just keep my mind open. And when somebody says, hey, do you think you want to go to Croatia? And the answer is always yes. Do you want to go to Morocco? Yes. I want to go everywhere.
Never say no.
It's a matter of time. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, why would you not go?
That's right.
So yeah, I loved my time in China. Japan. I've been to quite a few places, but I would love to revisit, because even as a photographer, I feel I have evolved. I shoot different things now and definitely shoot with a very different style. So it would be so nice to go back and generate something that's more meaningful to me at this stage.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I'd like to take you back to the beginning. Where's your earliest photography memory? What's the first thing you remember, shooting?
That's a really good question. I think it happened so subconsciously that I did not even realize it. So I was a medical student, and I already had kids. I had kids before I hit medical school.
Yep.
So we were obviously very poor. Because all the money went towards paying the medical school fees
sure.
Whatever was left for the kids. So all of our time, all of our vacations were camping trips. Even growing up, I used to be very outdoorsy, but especially as a young parent and as a student, I was spending a lot of time in nature because we could afford camping. Couldn't really afford hotels and fancy places, and that was a blessing in disguise, because I was starting to take pictures of my kids, and I was starting to do it in the outdoors.
Yep.
And then gradually the camera turned from the kids to just the outdoors and started documenting nature. And before I knew it, I was making images of nature. So it happened really so gradually that I did not even realize that I was falling in love with photography.
Yeah.
And then what actually gave the impetus to the art was when I was working at the hospital. I was not very happy with the ambiance we had in the hospital in terms of, the walls were very whitewashed and fluorescent lights and a very intimidating atmosphere. And I felt that the time I was spending in nature was very therapeutic, and why don't we display images of nature on the walls, create a better ambiance for healing? And so when I proposed the idea to the hospital board, they liked it, and they said, sure, we can do it. And so that sort of gave me the motivation to go out and start generating images, because they were accepting of my images going on the walls.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I got into nature photography. And now there was purpose behind it, because it was important to generate images of high quality that would have a soothing effect and could be printed really big in size and put up on the walls. So that's sort of how the journey in photography started about 10 years ago.
Yeah, fantastic. So was that impetus to generate those images for the hospital, etc.? Was that where you it started to click for you to shift, I guess, from where most photographers start, which is, documenting what's around them, to actually creating something that's more artistic?
Yeah, definitely. Because the first round, when I took images to them, I was just taking wow images, like raging sunrises and sunsets. And they took one look at that and said, this won't work, because, to a person who is sort of anxious and, upset, you don't want to present them necessarily with drama.
Yeah, dramatic skies aren't really where you want to be. Yeah.
Right. No. So you want more blues and greens. And I started understanding how certain colors are important to incorporate into the images to have a soothing effect, and how to avoid certain colors.
Yep.
They might cause too much drama. So it was an interesting learning experience.
Yeah, definitely. I've actually got a print client that demands blue skies, doesn't like clouds, and even white puffy ones, doesn't want them, wants just clear blue skies. And part of that is actually a mental health thing. So I'm happy to oblige. It's just a bit of anathema to a landscape photographer. They're usually the worst skies to shoot.
Yes. But actually, I think, a sunrise or a sunset that is like flaming is easy to shoot, right?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it's wonderful to capture. And of course, we look forward to it and love the drama. But I think when you have to go beyond that, and you're given something more bland, and now you're asked to create sort of magic from the mundane, I think when you succeed in doing that, it's a much more rewarding process, because anybody can get a phenomenal picture if they have phenomenal conditions, right? But what if you did not have phenomenal conditions and you still have a certain purpose behind your photography, and then you're able to accomplish that? I think the joy you derive from that is far greater.
Totally agree with you there. Yeah. What's the most memorable photography experience you've had?
So I went to the National Redwood Forest in Northern California. This was sort of very early in my career, and I had just, sort of learned the fundamentals of photography, and I did have in my mind that I want to generate images that are sort of healing and can be used for hospital walls, but didn't quite know how I was going to do that.
Yep.
And so as I was walking through the forest, the fog was getting really thick, and my initial idea was to take the trail down to the coast and see if I could create something there. But then the fog was getting so thick towards the ocean that I had to turn back, and I was like, okay, I'm going to walk back to higher ground and see if I can put myself above the fog bank and perhaps create something. And as I was walking back, I was in this redwood forest where these trees are hundreds, if not thousands of years old, and they're hundreds of stories tall, and they just make you feel very small, and your problems seem really insignificant. So I'm walking back, and then all of a sudden I see the sun is beginning to pierce through the fog, and God beams are forming behind these giant redwood trees. And I think that was my first spiritual experience in nature as far as finding flow, and I had never experienced that feeling of flow before while for the photography was being pursued. So it was just an eye opener for me. I didn't even know that you could achieve such a state. And so that, I think I distinctly remember falling to my knees and remembering all the technical aspects that I have to shoot with multiple exposures. I have to use a wide angle lens, and all of that stuff was kicking in. But more importantly, it was such an awe-inspiring scene. And when I looked at the back of my camera, I had to gasp and say, "Oh my God, I have the power to actually capture something this beautiful." I had no idea that I could create something, that beautiful. So in that instant, the joy I felt, I was like, I need to feel this again and again. So
it's definitely an addiction, isn't it?
Yes. I think once you experience that, it's like, okay, how can I get back to this state again and again?
Yeah. How far do you travel each year in your photography?
I travel quite a bit because, first of all, my parents are, my mom's in India, so I visit her every 3 months. So that 10,000-mile journey is like habitual now. I do it every 3 months. So traveling to me, and I've done it for as long as I can remember. So I have always been a global traveler. And now, since I conduct workshops all over the world, there is quite a bit of travel involved in that as well. Even during the pandemic, I was able to get out, not internationally, of course, but, domestically, I was still able to get out and photograph. And it was sort of a pleasure to have the places quiet and nobody there and everything being quiet out in the wilderness. I would say I almost travel on a monthly basis.
Wow. Okay. Do you find that where you live influences how you shoot in any way?
I think so. I live in California, and we're surrounded by such natural beauty and so many locations to choose from. So it's no accident that we have so many nature photographers in the Bay Area, specifically Northern California. I mean, we have our oceans, we have our mountains, and we have our forests. So there is a plethora of subject matter to indulge ourselves in. I think it definitely, I think it's the same for Pacific Northwest. You have a whole bunch of nature photographers there. Utah also attracts a bunch of nature photographers. So people who live in these places, I think you just fall in love with what you're surrounded by, and you start to capture it.
Yeah. What came first, the photography or the choice to live where you live?
I don't think I was even indulging in photography that much when we moved to California.
Sure.
Because I was like in the middle of my medical training, and I was taking pictures, but it had not turned professional yet. So definitely the move to California was not premeditated in terms of, I'll be able to pursue nature photography there. Rather, after I came to California and started working in the hospital and realized, we need images of nature, that I began to look around and say, of course, we're in the middle of so much, so why not? Yeah. So I got lucky that way, things worked out.
Do you have a favorite spot that you keep getting called back to? And if so, what is it that makes you keep going back?
There are two places that I go back to, I guess, partly because of proximity and partly it's just the way they make me feel. So the one that's closest to home is Yosemite. And it's just, I feel it's God's playground. I mean,
there's just so much there to photograph.
Right. Yeah, and such vast open spaces. I don't like it, of course, during the summer months when there's a bunch of tourists, but especially like after a winter storm, there's nobody in the park, and you walk in and it's just a winter wonderland. So I absolutely love photographing Yosemite through all the seasons, but especially winter. And the other place that I really like to go to are the redwood forests up by Oregon border, California-Oregon border. And love that just because there's something about those old growth forests, something very spiritual, and to realize there were so many, people who walked those paths before me, and these trees have stood there through the test of time, and that they'll be there, for I don't know how many more hundreds of thousands of years. It's good to know that there's a sense of we may be transient, but there is something greater, something more beautiful that will last long after we are gone. It's a good feeling to have.
Absolutely. I guess that brings me to what the practice of photography has taught you about the world.
It's taught me to be more patient. Because, when you have to wait for hours together for the right light, you practice patience. It has taught me to be present in the moment, right? Because you have to be keenly aware of what is happening before you. You can't be lost thinking about the past or be worried about what will happen in the future. But to be just present in the moment. It has taught me to appreciate the little things in life, the dewdrops on a leaf, the color of the clouds at sunset, the smell of wet earth, all of these things which seem like small things, but are actually probably the more important things in life. And to sort of garner those little joys, if I can call them, because, those add up, and that's what makes life overall a happier one, when you can take pleasure in those little moments.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about the process now and how you sort of plan for a photography trip. And it's not necessarily an overseas one that you're doing for your own photography.
So I'm definitely scouting out locations that I find interesting in terms of the geographical places that I get to. But once I get there, what I actually pick to shoot that particular day really depends on the light, depends on the weather, what kind of atmosphere I get. So I don't know what the actual image is going to be about. I just know that I would like to explore this place, and try to create images there. And I think reacting to light and reacting to conditions is what has given me the best yield when it comes to finding or being able to create images that really resonate with me. I'm not the kind of person who has like a preconceived notion of, this is the exact image I want to create. I don't have that. I would find that very restrictive and almost a little bit boring, right? Because then what's the challenge? It's good to not know what I'll create that day, but say, okay, I'm going to be in the forest, so I have a general idea of what kind of things I want to be looking out for, but the images will come to me rather than me trying to gun down one image.
Yeah, I really like that approach too. When you're in the field, what are those things? Obviously the light, a foreground thing. What are the things that are sort of those that you're letting catch your eye?
So I like to think of it as like the focal points that I'm drawn to. So if I'm analyzing the scene before me, then obviously, like you said, the light and conditions will influence what becomes the protagonist of the story. And once I identify, okay, this is a story about such and such a focal point, then at that point, it is how can I arrange that in an aesthetic fashion to basically minimize distractions, make it a compelling composition so the story comes through strongly. And that is what I find to be challenging. Sometimes we are able to do that, and we are able to position ourselves in a certain way or shoot in a certain fashion that minimizes those distractions. And then at other times, no matter how hard I try, it becomes too complex a scene, and I just can't get, it's too confusing a story, and I have to give up. So that's sort of the challenge I face. And but making that first emotional connection to something in the scene and saying this is what I want the story to be about is sort of my starting point.
Yeah, right. So once you've, I guess, captured what it is that you're happy with, are you straight back home, straight onto the computer and edit straight away, or are you more of the let it sit there for a while or maybe even forget about it for a little while and come back to it, days or months later?
So actually, because I'm pursuing a dual career in medicine and in photography, there are no days off. Literally. So if I have finished shooting and have come home, it's because I have a shift starting at 8 a.m. the next morning, which is probably going to run for 12 or 14 hours. So I don't have that luxury of being able to, take the time to download immediately or post-process immediately, because there is a huge other part of my life that I need to, sort of hit the ground running.
Yeah, right.
So I very rarely will have the time to even download the images right after a shoot. It'll be a few days before I can download the images, and then a few more days before I can get to post-processing them. And sometimes, it'll be just one image that I can get to because I just feel like, doing something that day. But usually every day, even when I'm working in medicine, every day at the end of the day and before I go to sleep, I try to spend at least 1 to 2 hours immersing myself in doing something that's related to photography that is creative. It just helps me to sort of calm myself down, and it's just a good part of the day. It's sort of like my relaxation phase. And so I sort of enter this, maybe not to the same degree as I do in the field, that feeling of bliss when you're lost in creating that image in the field. But I do experience a similar feeling when I'm post-processing, because it's still a creative process and you're still adding, your own creative vision to how that image is coming about. So I don't feel rushed. I actually enjoy the process. So I take my time. Sometimes, it may take only 5 minutes to get what I feel quite satisfied about. Sometimes it takes 5 days and I'm like, I don't know. I'm still struggling with it. So it's varied from image to image, but I try to put in at least a little bit of time every day. Now, does that really happen every day? Not really, because life has
I get it.
Yeah.
So in terms of processing style, are you fairly minimalistic, or are you one to create lots of different layers and lots of small edits on individual parts of the image? How do you go about that? Is it something that you've sort of developed as a standing process, or is it something that you just sort of let the image speak to you and edit as you see fit from there?
It's very different from image to image. So I do take quite a bit of time to post-process. If needed, I can definitely add, multiple layers and masks and go after every subsection of the image and, adjust every color and sort of make it a very labor-intensive process if I feel that image warrants that kind of post-processing. But by the same token, if I come across an image that I just feels right off the bat, and it just needs minimal adjustment and I'm done in 5 minutes. So it's not the amount of post-processing that I have to do that makes an image feel right. It's more whether my creative vision is being met or not, whether the end product is something I resonate with and I'm happy with from an aesthetic perspective or not. Sometimes I will post-process for days and at the end of it, I'm still not happy with it. Then, it's not an image that is successful for me. And at other times, even with minimal post-processing, I get an image that I feel is worthy of being featured in my portfolio. So I don't think it's so much the process. I mean, it doesn't mean that I hiked a lot to get the shot or, whatever went in to generate the image doesn't matter. because in the end, the only thing that matters is what is the visual before me, right? And do I resonate with it and connect with it, and does it have true emotional impact or does it not? And that is the answer to whether that image is successful.
Yeah. How do you deal with frustration and maybe hitting creative walls?
That, I think, is a luxury that photographers can enjoy. Because if you can photograph every day, then you might have periods where you have a creative block. But if you are literally starved, to photograph, like if you're looking forward to photograph, there is really no time for a creative block, right? And since I flip-flop between the two professions, there isn't really time to feel fatigued or tired of either one. So, like say I work 3 days in medicine. By the time the 4th day rolls around, I'm switching hats and becoming a photographer. So those 3 days were not enough to fatigue me in working in medicine. And then when I do photography, and I do it for a few days, and then it's time to switch back to medicine. So I haven't really spent so much time in photography that I've gotten bored or exhausted my
You've had enough
creative potential. Right. So actually, in a strange way, forcing myself to go back and forth makes me truly appreciate each of those fields even more. So when I'm doing medicine, I miss photography, and when I'm doing photography, I miss medicine. So I understand each one has a very, very positive impact on my life, and I crave it quite a bit. Having said that, I mean, of course, there are periods in my life when, something may have happened that makes it difficult to achieve a state of flow, like mentally, if you are not at peace. Because of events that happen in life, it's possible that you cannot enter a creative state, right? You kind of have to be at peace with yourself to be able to create quality art. And if you're not able to achieve that peace, how are you going to create the art? So especially during the pandemic and during periods when I've had personal loss, it has been really difficult to create. So those are definitely periods that I could not. That I simply could not create. And during those periods, I actually took the time to just be in nature and not place any demands on myself, to not even take out the camera and just say, why don't you just sit here and just feel, just take in the sights and sounds and smells, and don't place any demands on yourself, just be.
And
that helped. And and that really helped to just be and not have to do anything and not have to answer to anything and just spend time in quiet solitude. And then after those periods, you find yourself even more creative than before. I think they're extremely therapeutic, and then your creativity just bounces back, because that's how you do begin to heal yourself, by immersing yourself in the art form all over again.
Absolutely. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing photographers right now?
I think we are probably our biggest enemies, right? Because say you want to talk about social media and say, well, Instagram is not supporting me. Well, Instagram is not supporting you, because Instagram is a platform that is trying to make money. It's not a platform that
That's right. You're the product.
Supposed to be. Exactly. So when you say, oh, I don't want to make reels, I just want to post photos, and Instagram is not supporting me, I think that mentality that I am more important than an entire platform, or like my art is more important than, say, a videographer's reel or something, is our biggest hurdle. If we did not indulge in that ego and said, I am not so important, my art is not so important. It's okay. If it's good, people get to see it. If it's not good, people don't see it. That's okay. The thing is, if you have taught yourself to be happy in the process of creating itself, then it doesn't really matter that much what happens later on. Totally. That's from the emotional aspect of it. But one could argue, what about the financial aspect of it, right? Like if you're drawing money from it, then how can you not be under stress? And I think that's where, we often talk about how we say, let the image come to you, don't chase after the image, because when the image comes to you, it's of higher quality. I think a similar approach is needed even when you're trying to sell prints or teaching workshops. At the end of it, it's your talent that counts, and it's your creative potential that's being measured against others. So anything we do to distract ourselves from our creative potential basically means we produce work that is not of high quality. And once we do that, we're basically burning our career, right?
Yeah, totally.
So I think having that self-discipline and not letting our thoughts, get away to the negative space, and staying with a positive attitude and keeping our expectations low, I think is probably the best route to take. So we maintain a sense of calm and a sense of joy through the whole creative process. And hopefully that'll translate to success, both emotionally and financially.
Fantastic. Where do you see the future of photography going?
I think it's very interesting because I was just looking up, what is that called? I forget, the artificial intelligence platform where you can just mid-ground or something. I'm probably misspeaking.
Yeah, there's about 3 or 4 of them out there.
Right. So you can just talk and say, I'm seeing a mountain surrounded by fog, blah, blah. So basically, you are creating an image based on your imagination, right? Something that you have not even seen physically, but something you have perceived, say, in your mind's eye, and you're creating it. I think that's fantastic. I think it's fantastic that you can look within yourself and then come up with images that don't even exist. And if you're happy doing that, then so be it. But for me, the joy in photography comes from the time that I spend in the outdoor spaces. Yep. It comes from being present, away from my computer, away from technology, away from everybody, in solitude, in nature. And to me, personally, there is no substitute for that. So if there are others like me who feel the same way, that the true reward is the time they're spending in the outdoors, then no matter how much artificial intelligence comes up and no matter how many virtual images we create or virtual worlds, it won't matter because for us, we'll still go out into the real world and still have those real experiences and feel better because of that. And there will be others who will do the same. So when I talk to my workshop clients about, what is the need to get up at 4 a.m. when you could just sit at your computer and, create the image of a sunrise, their answer has always been, because I want to see it in person.
You want to experience it. Yeah.
Right. So I think from a creator's perspective, it's very interesting that we're entering a virtual world where AI is going to have such a hefty role in creating imagery. But as far as personal experiences go, I think people, just humans, it's our nature to be out there and have those adventures and feel the adrenaline pumping. So I think we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I can't see extracting the human element out of the process really taking on, because, as you said, it's that experience of being there in the moment that people actually crave, not necessarily the end result of the photograph. I mean, there's loads of people that...
And it might be, and it might be better for us, Grant, if there is a subsection of human society that just want to sit on their couch and play virtual games. Then the places that we want to go to are less crowded, and I'm all for that.
Yeah, same here. the less people in my shots, the better.
Right, exactly. I'm like, go for it. You don't need to be out there. I'll be out there.
That's right. I'll be out there taking the shots for you. And whether you look at them or not, I don't mind.
Yeah.
So if you weren't a photographer, what would you be?
I wasn't a photographer, what would I be? Well, I'm already a physician. So that is a trick question. I would probably do more of medicine, but in my other life, I would probably be like a tour guide or, like just take people out into nature to have adventures, like not necessarily take pictures, but just to have the experience. I think that's what I would be doing.
Yeah. What's your least favorite thing about being a photographer?
Least favorite thing about being a photographer? I think, let me think about that. Maybe it's, that sense of competition that is thrust upon us. Maybe it's sort of the pressure we put on ourselves, right? Like,
yep.
Once we have created a body of work, it's we have to be extra careful not to fall into the trap of trying to be perfect constantly, like making every image better than the last. May not be possible. So I feel that we put a lot of pressure upon ourselves, especially once we have earned respect amongst our peers. We are so scared about taking risks and maybe putting out an image that might not be up to our standard because we're, sort of have this reputation to uphold. And it's sort of a general feeling we perpetuate with our behavior. And I wish we did not have to do that. I wish we could just let go. I wish we would not be judged, if somebody threw out an image that may not be their best, that everybody wouldn't say, oh, what the heck is going on, sort of, but say it's okay, it's okay once in a while to just have something that may not be very high standard come out and still not lose respect.
Yeah, sure. Are there any photographers that are catching your eye at the moment that you think I should be talking to?
Well, my mentor was Mark Adamus. More than his photography style, it was his sense of adventure. I was very timid and had not really done too many extreme outdoor activities before I met him. And hanging out with him, he basically does like heli hiking tours, kayaking amongst glaciers, stuff like that, which gave me confidence, and he pushed me to hike, greater distances at higher elevations and that sort of thing. And I think for that reason, I respect him a lot. Of course, his art is very awe-inspiring too, but especially the fact that he taught me to love that sense of adventure. I think he's definitely one worth. Have you spoken to him already?
I haven't yet. He's on my list. I haven't approached him yet, though.
Yeah. So definitely, I think it's good to incorporate more women.
Absolutely, I'm always on the lookout for great female photographers.
Right, and I was looking at your list, and I see that you do have quite a few of us coming onto your podcast. So thank you so much for that. Definitely appreciate that, especially because we are still a minority in the field, but looks like we're growing quite rapidly at the moment.
Definitely, yeah.
I was just thinking of, if you could interview people who focus on nature conservation, the Paul McCluns of the world, they have quite a bit of attention, but, every time when the purpose of the photography is nature conservation, I think individuals like that do need to be, brought to the forefront because they're doing something that impacts all of us.
Yeah, definitely. And that's another thing that's always very high on my list in looking for people that are out there to talk to. I actually had a climate scientist on here from Sydney University who was on a couple of weeks ago, and he's a fantastic photographer, but B, really up to date on the latest climate science and what's going on with conservation and everything. And a big focus of his work is obviously making sure that people are made aware. He uses his photography in his education as well as visual aids. As you know, the best way is to show, not tell.
Exactly. So how did you pick me, Grant? Because we haven't really interacted before this, right?
No. It was a combination of a few of those things. A, you're female. B, you're an amazing photographer. That's first and foremost. I mean, I look at people's work, and if it inspires me, then they usually get on the list that way.
Thank you.
I think you also got mentioned by a few others that I've spoken to in the past as well. And I've also heard you speak in spaces on Twitter a couple of times as well. And so fairly early on, when I first started this, you got put on the list. So.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you very much for your time. I've only got one more question for you. And for some of my listeners, it's the most important one that I can ask. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
Am I in Italy or am I in America?
You're in America.
If I'm in America, yes. If I'm in Italy, that's disgusting. You know what they say, you got to be a Roman in Rome.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's been wonderful talking to you today, Sapna, and thank you so much for giving as much of your time as you have. Where can people find your work?
My website is sapnareddy.com. I'm also available on Instagram with my name, and the Facebook page is Sapna Reddy Photography. Flickr is also by my name, Sapna Reddy, and on Twitter is Photodoc, Fotodoc. So all of those places I usually share my images. The Flickr account is the most up-to-date because my website intermittently gets updated. The new work is still not there, but Flickr gets it, and then it's subsequently posted to Instagram and Facebook.
Cool. All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Grant. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work and this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.